the silent shadow they feared. Until a brave kitten broke through. The black dog had learned to disappear long before anyone noticed he was trying. In the dim corner of the county shelter, where the fluorescent lights flickered against concrete walls, he pressed himself into the shadows as if hoping to become part of them. His name was written on a card outside his kennel, but no one ever called it. Most visitors walked past without slowing, their eyes sliding over the dark shape in the back as though he were simply another shadow cast by the bars. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't loud. He was just invisible in the way that black dogs often are, overlooked in favor of lighter coats that caught the eye, smaller frames that seemed less intimidating, younger faces that promised easier futures. At 7 years old, with a coat like midnight and eyes that held too much history, he had become the kind of dog people looked through rather than at. The shelter staff tried. They walked him during quiet hours, took photos in better lighting, wrote hopeful descriptions on his kennel card. But the applications never came. Weeks turned into months, and the black dog remained in his corner, watching the world move past him with the patient resignation of someone who had stopped expecting anything different. Then came the kitten. She arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, pulled from a storm drain by a maintenance worker who heard her cries echoing through the metal grate. She was tiny, orange and white, with oversized ears and a voice that filled every corner of the building the moment she entered. The staff placed her in the quarantine area, a separate section where new arrivals stayed before joining the general population. But this kitten had no interest in staying anywhere she was placed. Within hours, she had escaped her kennel, squeezing through a gap no one thought possible. By evening, she had explored the supply closet, the office, and the hallway leading to the dog kennels. The staff found her repeatedly, returning her to quarantine each time, but she slipped out again with the determination of someone on a mission no one else understood. On the third escape, she made it all the way to the dog wing. The barking started immediately, a cascade of sound that rolled through the kennels like thunder. Dogs pressed against their gates, excited or alarmed by the tiny intruder weaving between their spaces. She moved past them all with fearless curiosity, her tail high, her steps confident despite the chaos she created. Then she reached the last kennel. The black dog hadn't moved from his corner. He watched the approaching kitten with quiet wariness, his body tense but still. When she stopped at his gate, pressing her small face between the bars, he didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply stared at her with dark, uncertain eyes. She meowed, loud and insistent, as if introducing herself. He remained silent. She pawed at the gate, trying to reach him through the narrow space. He stayed where he was, pressed against the back wall. A staff member arrived moments later, scooping up the kitten with practiced efficiency. But as she was carried away, the kitten twisted in the worker's arms, her eyes locked on the black dog, still calling out to him with that piercing, determined voice. For the first time in months, the black dog lifted his head and watched someone leave. The escapes continued. No matter how carefully they secured her kennel, the kitten found a way out. And every time, she went straight to the dog wing, straight to the last kennel, straight to the black dog who never made a sound. The staff began to notice a pattern. While other dogs barked and lunged when the kitten appeared, the black dog simply waited. His body language shifted from wary to watchful, then from watchful to something softer. He no longer pressed himself into the corner when she arrived. Instead, he moved closer to the gate, lowering his head to her level, breathing in her scent through the bars. She would sit on the other side, grooming herself casually as though they had known each other forever, occasionally reaching a paw through to touch his nose. He never pulled away. After 2 weeks of constant escapes, the shelter director made an unusual decision. They moved the kitten's kennel directly beside the black dog's, separated only by a partial barrier that allowed them to see and smell each other without full contact. The change was immediate. The kitten stopped trying to escape. She settled into her space with contentment, spending hours pressed against the barrier, purring loud enough to be heard from the hallway. And the black dog, who had spent months invisible in his corner, began spending his days at the front of his kennel, lying beside the barrier where the kitten waited. Visitors started to notice. A family walking through the dog wing paused at the unusual sight. A small child pointed, delighted by the kitten curled up beside the large black dog, both of them resting peacefully despite the bars between them. The parents stopped too, drawn by the unexpected tenderness of the scene. They asked questions. The staff explained the story, how the kitten had chosen the black dog despite all logic, how she had refused to stay away from him, how he had responded to her fearless affection with a gentleness no one knew he possessed. The family didn't adopt that day, but they took photos. They shared them online. And slowly, people began to return, not for the kitten, but to see the black dog she had claimed. More visitors meant more attention. A woman in her 60s came specifically to meet him, explaining that she had lost her own black dog years ago and hadn't been ready until now. She knelt beside his kennel, speaking softly while the kitten watched from her perch. The black dog approached cautiously, sniffing her extended hand, allowing her touch. But when the woman asked about adoption, she hesitated. She lived alone in a small apartment. She wasn't sure she could manage a dog his size. Then she noticed the kitten pressing against the barrier, purring. She asked the question that changed everything. Could she adopt them both? The staff exchanged glances. It was unusual, but not impossible. The kitten was healthy, cleared for adoption. The black dog had shown nothing but gentleness toward her. And the bond between them was undeniable. They ran a home check. They discussed the logistics. They prepared the paperwork. 2 weeks later, on a bright Saturday morning, the woman returned. The black dog seemed to sense something different. He stood at the front of his kennel, body tense with cautious hope, watching as the staff opened the gate. They fitted him with a new collar, attached a leash, and led him into the hallway. The kitten meowed from her carrier, loud and demanding. He pulled toward the sound, his tail lifting slightly, the first wag anyone had seen from him in months. They were loaded into the woman's car together, the kitten's carrier placed where the dog could see her. As they drove away from the shelter, the black dog pressed his nose against the carrier's grate, and the kitten pushed her face forward to meet him. The woman's apartment was small but filled with sunlight. She had prepared carefully, setting up separate spaces for each animal, unsure how they would adjust to the new environment. She needn't have worried. The moment she released them, the kitten ran straight to the black dog, weaving between his legs, rubbing against his chest, claiming him with the same fearless determination she had shown in the shelter. And he, who had spent so long learning to disappear, stood solid and present, lowering his head to gently nuzzle the tiny creature who had refused to let him fade away. They settled into a rhythm quickly. The dog learned the apartment's layout, the soft rug by the window, the cool tile in the kitchen, the quiet corners where sunlight pooled in the afternoon. But wherever he rested, the kitten was beside him, curled against his dark fur, purring with contentment. At night, they shared the dog bed the woman had purchased, the kitten nestled between his front paws, both of them breathing in synchronized peace. The woman watched them with wonder, realizing she had gained more than 2 pets. She had witnessed something profound, a lesson in seeing beyond first impressions, in recognizing value where others saw only shadow. The black dog who had been invisible for so long was finally seen, not because he changed, but because a brave kitten had looked at him and decided he mattered. She had broken through the barrier of fear and assumption with nothing more than persistence and affection, refusing to accept that the quiet shadow in the corner was anything less than worthy of love. Months passed. The kitten grew into a sleek young cat, confident and bold, but she never strayed far from her black dog. And he, who had learned to disappear, now moved through the apartment with quiet confidence, secure in the knowledge that he was no longer invisible. The woman often shared their story with friends, with family, with anyone who would listen. She posted photos online, the striking contrast of orange and black, small and large, the unlikely pair who had chosen each other against all odds. And sometimes, late at night, when the apartment was still and the city lights filtered through the windows, she would watch them sleeping together and feel grateful for the reminder they offered. That the ones who seem invisible are often simply waiting for someone brave enough to see them. That fear and assumption can be broken by persistence and love. That sometimes the smallest voice can call forth the biggest change. The black dog had learned to disappear, but the kitten had taught him to be seen. And in doing so, she had shown everyone watching that there is no shadow too dark to hold light, no heart too guarded to open, no creature too overlooked to matter. Their story became a quiet beacon for the shelter, a reminder shared with every visitor who walked past the black dogs, the older animals, the ones who waited longest in the corners. Because sometimes all it takes is one small voice, one persistent heart, one brave soul willing to break through the barriers everyone else accepts. The silent shadow they had feared was never dangerous. He was simply waiting for someone to prove that being seen was safe. And the brave kitten who broke through didn't just save one dog. She changed how everyone looked at the shadows, teaching them to see the light that had been waiting there all along.